The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome from Imaginatik. This is Luis Solis, President of North America of the firm, and with me today is Moises Norena, Global Director of Innovation from Whirlpool. And we have an exciting subject for all of us today called Getting Serious About Enterprise Change, the Innovation PMO. And for those of you who are less familiar with that acronym, it is a project management office. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. One comment for all of you is that in your GoToWebinar panel, you should be able to see a questions area where you can actually submit questions. For example, I see that Luis Felipe said hello. But if you have questions, submit them there because we're going to be answering them not at the end, but at various convenient breakpoints in the next 40, 45 minutes. We appreciate questions. They help to make this as relevant as possible for you, and they also add some sparks for Moises and myself. You can learn more about our entire webinar series by going to the www.imaginatik.com site, where in this year, 2012, we'll be doing these about every 2 months. Let me go ahead and flip my slide here. So just a little bit first about myself. I have been doing a fair amount of enterprise change and technology management for over 27 years, where this has all culminated in my role as President of North America of Imaginatik, and today upwards of 90% of our business is North America, but we're expanding in Europe and Latin America very quickly. That experience not only is in innovation, but in enterprise supply chain, outsourced operations, and quite a bit of venture-backed activities, even as a venture investor. Moises, a few words about you. Do you want to say a few words about yourself, please?
Thanks, Luis. Moises Norena with Whirlpool. I've been with Whirlpool for a little over 10 years, originally from Mexico City. Went there to architecture school and have worked in different fields, including design and architecture to software development, and here at Whirlpool primarily working on the commercial areas, product development, in marketing in the last few years in innovation. I really love this opportunity and happy to talk to all of you today.
Terrific. And before we move on to the next slide, let me mention this is a recorded presentation. That's why we have you on mute. Otherwise, we would open it up more broadly. The link is published by our global marketing team within about a week or so that you can share it with your colleagues, partners, customers, what have you, and often that is a very effective way to start a conversation and maybe make some points that you'd like to make with them. Just a word about us. Some of you know us as an idea innovation management software company, and that is certainly what we have been for over 16 years. What's distinguished us and what we continue to invest in is a human systems, human perspective approach to innovation. It is not just technical, it is not just about the strategic intent, but it's really about the human organization to make it all happen, thus today's discussion. We specialize really working with organizations that usually have more than 2,000 or 3,000 employees, are distributed around the world, and are seeking compelling breakthrough results by tapping their people, sometimes going externally to customers, experts, and vendors. Tremendous software that continues to be ranked in terms of joy of use, ease of use, and robustness at the very top of the list by our customers, which is what matters the most, but obviously Forrester, Gartner, and many of the technology analysts. And something, again, quite interesting about Imaginatik is our strategic consulting around executive alignment, insight generation, and innovation processes to round out a complete end-to-end set of solutions for customers. And that brings us to today. All of you watching this webinar and who are in this career of innovation results and management know this, that The really remarkable stuff takes a tremendous amount of focus, focus on your part, focus on your team and organization, and sometimes, let's be serious, innovation is touted as a priority but does not have the mind share, the budgeting, and the commitment that focus would imply. Having said that, properly done, innovation is about big change, very big change, and that's why we're having this discussion today, because it's not that it's easy to do in just one business unit, one product area, or for one new launch. But when you scale that to part or all of the enterprise or a whole region of the business, learning new behaviors, rolling out new behaviors, using new tools, techniques, becomes the essence of really achieving the objectives and results set out over a 1, 2, 3, and 4-year horizon. And so we have great passion about this subject at Imaginatik, and I'm delighted that Moises can speak to it with a very real-life case study at Whirlpool. Many organizations come to us and say, Imaginatik, we're good at incremental innovation, we're good at tactics, product extension, process fine-tuning, but breakthroughs. Why is it that we're not getting breakthroughs? And often we find when we're doing innovation assessments of our clients or organizations that the runway isn't long enough, there hasn't been enough time, enough dedicated resource, largely human time and resource, or that in general the expectation about results was unrealistic, both as to time, effort, and scale. So we remind you today that the more breakthroughs you want, the more dedicated resources and commitment may be required. While obvious, it merits repeating, because this is a frequent issue where clients come to us and say, my God, we stood up a program for 90 days. We can't believe they aren't successful yet. And I think that's not fair to any of you, but it also limits operational and enterprise success. So let's talk a little bit about our point of view, and this is not going to surprise you given what we just said in these last few images to you. It's a human system. Innovation is often disrupting, changing, adding on to, or deviating from how a great organization works. The organization has functions and working methods that deliver today exactly what it's supposed to deliver, but to do the new things, the human system must change. And technology is a powerful enabler, but it is the behaviors, the rewards, the recognitions, the role, the structure. I've already mentioned long-term view, at least 2 to 3 years, and as you're going to see from the Whirlpool story, great things happen at inflection points after year 2, 3, and 4, and this is very important to drive through our planning and our resourcing and the education of the organization. And fully supported, I think our statement here maybe is just a little short of the fullness of what it should say. Clearly, top-down support that affects time and budgeting. It's also making sure that middle management, as we know, all of us who have worked in middle management or with middle management know, that is where the ultimate bottleneck and or ability to slow down change resides. And so making sure that it's fully supported by middle management and senior leadership is really crucial for this kind of success. We know everything I've said so far. We know it all. Breakthrough takes dedication. There is big change in innovation. Innovation with a big I takes great change. And we've got to be focused. So why, knowing all of that, why, with all of the stakes in succeeding being so high, why is there so much failure, stalling, or under-delivery? Well, I suppose, as with all good presentations, we've already kind of answered the question to some extent. We see insufficient focus and often improper or insufficient information. Clearly, there's a question of dedicated resources, but also often silo perspectives. For example, where does innovation report up into? What part of the organization? And do we have the information for the initiative using new systems or tools that is going to get us to understand progress, success, course correction? And often the control and tracking metrics aren't really all they should be. So this is why we are advocates for a period of years, and then this morphs into other types of organizational structures. We're a big advocate of the Innovation Project Management Office. It's something we've done with numerous clients and organizations to great success. Moises will be giving you an example of how this is a crucial aspect of Whirlpool's story, but also we're going to share with you here in a moment why portfolio management of initiatives, not of the actual products that you're trying to roll out, but multiple initiatives in your organization often benefit from a project management office approach. And here's why. Here is really, if you look at this for a moment, you're saying, but of course, this is everything we either have, want to have, we're part of the way here. But in addition to the governance tier, which is not only proper steering committees, innovation champion circles, sponsors, feedback loops to do learning on what's worked, what's not worked for knowledge management, there are three fundamental blocks, namely the portfolio program management, the actual project management, and then the support infrastructure. I'm not going to read all of these. I'll highlight one out of each of the right boxes. And in particular, no doubt that portfolio program management, we find in most organizations we are asked to help that different divisions, different units, different teams have different processes and standards for status reporting, metrics, and targets on innovation. It's very hard to have an enterprise report card, business case, or ROI when that's happening. Clearly, that's obvious on its face, but that happens all the time. And there's good reasons. There's many passionate people who want to jumpstart this and may not always work with one plan. Under project management, I'd say budget and schedule management is crucial. Often, when doing anything new, the ability to deliver some things early on is mission critical, and it is so important to be able to time out and milestone when will results happen, of what magnitude, what are the gating factors. It's almost like the innovation initiative needs its stage gates in addition to actual product or service or model development. And finally, support infrastructure. Quite often, we are using income statements, SharePoint, Excel sheets, and don't have the requisite tools, platforms with built-in metrics, scorecards to support this kind of innovation PMO. Thus, it's either too expensive to do, too laborious, and just too difficult to get the results that you would want. Before I turn it over to Moises, we have a few questions. I just want to reiterate that Q&A is at any time. Submit your questions at any time. The presentation will be shared as a presentation on our webinar clip. If you have more interest, by all means, get in touch with us. Clearly, the recording will show all of the visual presentations so that you can actually talk about those. And again, if you have interest in slides or more content discussions, please reach out to us at Imaginatik, and we can provide those details at the very end. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Moises Norena of Whirlpool. He is, for those of you who know this, maybe that's why you're here, Whirlpool is, in our opinion, one of a dozen absolutely best practice enterprise innovation practitioners and case studies in the world. And Moises has had the opportunity to be making contributions at Whirlpool going back almost back to 2002, actually maybe even earlier, 2001. He is a graduate of Universidad La Salle in Mexico City, but also Purdue's Krannert School of Management. And it's interesting to me that Moises is a design thinker. He is a systems thinker, in part because his BA was in architecture. Let's welcome Moises Norena. Moises, it's really terrific to have you here today.
Thank you, Luis. I am just taking control here of the screen, so bear with me for 1 second. So I'm hoping that everyone sees my screen right now. That has the cover of a little bit of our story I'm going to share with you, going back to a number of years in which we started innovation. often like to refer to innovation as one friend, a good friend of mine does, and I've stolen this phrase from him because I think it's very applicable. He says that innovation is like sex at age 10. Everyone talks about it, but nobody knows what it is. And, you know, I think the reason why is that is because innovation as a discipline hasn't been agreed upon. I don't think there's a common agreement of how innovation should be done. So I'm going to offer an approach that Whirlpool has taken and that I think can be applicable for many of the people in the audience, I hope, or at least some elements of it. Some people that may be familiar with us have heard about the Whirlpool story, so I'm going to be very short in sharing that with you, but I think it helps set some context of why does Whirlpool do innovation and what our approach is. So for those that have heard it, bear with me for a few minutes. But Whirlpool, we just became 100 years old last year, so we're in our 101st year of transformation. And each one of these transformations has taken a group of leaders in a PMO to make it happen. Okay, probably in the early days when we went from selling machines, washing machines to Sears into a multi-brand, multi-product company, it was a little bit of a different scale, but when we thought about expanding in the 80s to a lot of brands, integrating those brands into our portfolio, that required a big initiative and a lot of coordination and explicit effort. Same thing with the globalization. At some point we acquired Consul brand and Embraco in Brazil, Philips in Europe, so on and so forth. And to make Whirlpool one company took a lot of effort, a decision from our CEO and a PMO to make things happen. As we started to grow in the 2000s, bringing Maytag and KitchenAid brands also took that type of effort. So the point I wanted to make with this slide is that every big transformation requires a very explicit effort from a lot of people and a lot of initiatives. I'm going to dig a little deeper in what it took from an innovation perspective to do that. I'm going to go back to the early 2000s or the end of 1999 in that era. And back then, we lived in a world in the appliance industry that we call the Sea of White. You know, I think to some extent some of this is true, but it was much more prominent in those days. If you needed to buy a range, a washer, a dishwasher, you will go into a trade floor probably without a brand in mind. You will get into the floor and just see a bunch of white ranges, and you will have a very hard time identifying or making a decision. So decisions were typically led by the salesman in the floor, pointing to who will offer the best technology and best features with at the least price. There was very little consumer differentiation. Consumers could care less if it was a Whirlpool brand or a GE, as long as they get a good deal. That was a call for action for Whirlpool, and that's something that our previous CEO, Dave Whitwan, took as a mission. And he said, Whirlpool is going to differentiate from a consumer perspective. And we're going to make that an explicit strategy that will drive the way we behave, the way we think, and the way we work. That drove to our brand value creation strategy. The first two pillars of this, the ones you see at the bottom, the global operating platform, that was something that we had at the time. We had plants all over the world. We had great technology. We had great quality product at the best cost possible. We were utilizing our assets globally. We were exporting and importing product from our own plants all over the world. We also had, we still have, a great trade platform. You know, we do a little bit of work direct to consumer, but primarily we get to our consumers through the trade. Our major trade partners over the years has been Sears, continues to be a great partner. More recently, in the last 10, 15 years, we've established great relationships with companies like Lowe's, Home Depot, and some others. Obviously, the major independents and other companies around the world like IKEA, etc. So we have a great position with the trade. But innovation, to make it work and to establish a connection with the consumer and a lot of loyalty, we really needed to establish a brand platform. Brands is what we use to communicate with the customers, is what identify the customers with us. And that's where innovation sits. Innovation is the way in which we connect with those consumers. And that's the explicit effort that took place earlier in the early 2000s, in that we continue to evolve from to make innovation happen at Whirlpool. So I'm going to go back to how this happened and when we are today. And we have this learning curve, which is something that applies to any discipline. I mean, you probably, some of you in the audience have seen this chart when we think about approaches like Six Sigma. Now you take an approach, you prove it, you start scaling it and bring it to the masses, then start driving results, and ultimately you have it embedded and you continuously improve it. In the case of innovation, when we decided that we needed to move from that sea of white, we took 25 people from their day-to-day jobs and created a proof of concept. We took an innovation process. We used the triple diamond process that you see a little reference there in the top right, and created a lot of content for doing discovery, and started with this team just digging deep into what is it going to take for us to get to the next level, and developed a bunch of findings from a trend perspective, from a consumer standpoint, what competitors were doing, what were our capabilities, so on and so forth. And this team started to deeply understand the process and also created a point of view of what would it take for the organization to make this happen. And that's when we took this to scaling. So that group of about 25 people, after a couple of years of being deep, just 100% dedicated to it, went and deployed to the regions and the businesses, and started to make this a reality in the everyday business. To do that required a very explicit effort, and we created a PMO and a series of innovation councils that will oversee how this happened and how this had to happen, how it will change the way people were doing their jobs. I'm going to show you a more detailed point of view of how that PMO looks like, but I'm going to show that in a more recent effort. But at the scaling time, that's what happened, and those 25 people went into the businesses and started to teach the organization how to do this. But teaching the process was not enough. We needed to put some scaling mechanisms that would align to the point of view of what innovation meant, and that started to measure the results. I'm going to come back to this slide in a second, but I'm going to jump to one of the scaling mechanisms that we had. There were a number of things that we did, but one of the most important ones is our innovation definition. Innovation, even today, is defined in very different ways in different companies. So we had to put a point of view of how we will measure it, especially because we decided that our leaders were going to get some part of their compensation, tied to innovation. So if you don't define what you mean by innovation, then it's hard to make that assessment. Not only that, we wanted to be able to measure the results of innovation at Whirlpool, and if it was just blended with all of the products that we put in the market, we would not be able to identify that. So at the very top level of the organization, we came up with an innovation definition that has those three elements that you see in the screen, and you can call those elements also the criteria for innovation when you classify it. I'll talk a little bit about our management system in a second, but when you measure innovation, we wanted to say what is it that we're measuring, and this is what we use to measure. So it's in some way the stick that we use to measure innovation. The primary element, or the first element of this definition, I think is the one that is most obvious and that is most commonly accepted when it comes to innovation. So You want to drive unique and compelling solutions. The uniqueness is the aspect that many times we relate to innovation. But when we put the compelling word, we are making that connection with the customer. It has to be based on a consumer insight that makes it relevant for that consumer. And we have ways to test that. And obviously that's also part of the inputs of the process. But the other two elements are what make it more specific for Whirlpool. And I know that this is not going to work for everyone, but it worked for us and actually has been a very consistent approach over the years, and we haven't changed it. The second element was it has to create sustainable competitive advantage. It's great to come up with great innovation, but if that innovation is quickly and easily copied and you don't have an answer right after that, then it's not sustainable, so all of your efforts would not be worthwhile. So we have ways in which we identify what sustainable means. An example of that is you have to have a migration path behind an innovation. So if we come up with something like you see in the screen, that's the Ace washer, which has been recently nominated for an Edison Award. It's a washer for the mainstream market in India. That has really taken the market by storm, but we know that quickly competition was going to take it because even though it's a great consumer proposition technology-wise, it probably doesn't have very unique features that others can copy. It has a motor, it has a tub, etc. But the way it was put together as a package made it very meaningful for consumers. So our answer to what competition may be doing is already ready to go, and that's what sustainable competitive advantage means. And lastly, it has to create superior shareholder value. And we know that innovation, if it's valued by the consumer, they will be willing to pay more for it. Therefore, it should be differentiated among our other products. And when we think about innovation at Whirlpool, we say, okay, if it's innovation, it has to meet that criteria. And that's a great way for us to measure how we're doing, be very pragmatic about how we do it. And as we go through the process of innovation, we can always go back to this definition and say, are we delivering, or are we going to deliver against these three objectives? But as a scaling mechanism is very powerful because that is really what the organization can rally around. So I'm going to go back to the previous slide and show you that that's really when we got to breakthrough. That's when the innovation efforts that we were putting started to pay off. And we were able to see how much of the efforts we were seeing in the marketplace. And we were able to measure them because we knew what innovation was among all of the other products. So for instance, in today's world, about 20% of our total revenues are defined by innovation. And over time that has grown, but given that the threshold is high, we know that we'll never be 100%. That's part of the point of having a definition. So that's the learning curve, you know. And as I get into this job, I really thought that we were in the sustaining space. So I was challenging myself in how am I going to get to a continuous improvement in innovation. So we went and did a diagnostic of where we were in innovation after almost 8 years in it. And we found a lot of opportunity areas, not only because regions had their own points of views after a few years of practicing it. We also got distracted by the MedTech acquisition. We were hit by the recession. So many factors played into how we were thinking about innovation in different areas of the organization. So what we found was that in innovation...
Moises, if I could, there's two questions that are related right to what you're talking about. Could I interrupt you for a second?
Yes, please.
Yeah, the two associated questions is, one, your definition of innovation seems broad. Has that posed a problem with focus? And the flip side of that question is, what did it take to get everybody to agree on a definition of innovation? That's often a stumbling block, right? That organizations have multiple definitions and no agreement. So it seems like you did agree on one. But the other question from Krishna is, it seems pretty broad. Has that been an issue?
That's a very good question, Luis. What did it take to get there? Number one, it's a reflection of what we want to accomplish as an organization. If you think about the strategic architecture in the chart I show you, where you see our brand-focused value creation strategy, and think of what do we want to accomplish with that. And then you match that with the definition. You can actually say, if we deliver on these three elements of the definition, we will accomplish our strategy. So that's why we can get agreement on what it means to drive that that definition. But we needed to make it broad enough so it didn't limit innovators. And if you look at that, you know, nothing is holding anyone from coming with an idea that can potentially take us into another business. There are some other elements that are not visible here that are also important as far as how do we execute innovation. But under our definition, we have what we call the strategic direction. That basically is a sandbox that says where should we focus our innovation efforts, or where should we point the innovation gun, as some people say. And that's just a bounding box that allows us to focus our efforts. Primarily in the case of Whirlpool, we say we want to continue to grow our core business. We know there's opportunity there. We want to extend that core by having products that leverage those existing businesses. For example, pedestals in front-load washers is a good example of that, or water filters in the refrigeration business. But we also want to extend from the core, and there are things like Gladiator Garage Works that takes us into another rooms. So that bounding box is how we direct our efforts, but still leaving our innovation definition in the approach wide enough for innovators to be able to impact that. What it took for people to accept it, I think number one, making sure that it's connected with our strategy. Number two is the way we're measuring, and to some extent rewarding people when it comes to the results as well. Okay, so I'm gonna.
Moises, thank you very much, Moises. And just on a time check, we have about 10 minutes or so.
That's perfect. I think we're right on track, and feel free to interrupt me if there's another question. So I was here on the next page, page 6, where I'm showing what we found out, and we found out that innovation, it's hard to do continuous improvement on innovation. I mean, it's really the learning curve for innovation is very different than any other competency because you cannot optimize it. Actually, there's a conference out there called Optimizing Innovation, and I participated there a couple of years ago, and that was a paradigm for me because I don't think you can optimize innovation. But anyway, we realized what the state was, and we decided that we needed to take a proactive approach to re-energize innovation and bring back the whole organization to some of the principles that we established when we decided to get into innovation. So it takes me to the Innovation PMO. This is an effort that started in recent history. And we realized that just keeping innovation embedded in the business was not enough to keep it where we wanted it to be. So we established this PMO. It's chartered by the executive committee. So you have people very close to the CEO in that group in sponsoring that effort. But then that box that is called the Growth and Innovation PMO has a number of people that are the people that can make the decisions on the businesses, that have accountability over their resources, and that defines how we're going to operationalize what our innovation efforts are. We went back to the definition, we went back to our strategy. We said this is still what is going to drive our strategy. So do we agree that that is the case? We agreed that that hadn't changed. So we just said, okay, what do we have to do to make sure that our approach is consistently applied and that we are delivering towards the results we want? And that can resource approve and actually push innovation, because one of the things with innovation is that it has to be part of the vocabulary of the leaders. It has to be shown in town hall meetings. It's going to be something that the people hear and see to know that it's actually happening. Under that PMO, there was a working council that is actually implementing this work. And here's where middle management gets into play. So people that are making the tactical decisions are the ones that can make it happen. And that was a very explicit group formed by the functions you see in that box that actually took the challenge and took then the pieces of the process, the decision points that have to happen, the management system elements, and execute them in the regions, in the businesses. This was supported by the right side box. You know, this is one new learning that we had in innovation in this round, was that the other functions have to be part of it. And they don't have to be just recipients, but groups like legal have to be deeply involved in the change management, because you have to manage IP. You have to teach people how to apply for patents, how to think about doing experimentation and not exposing our projects. So they have a key role in teaching the innovation teams how to do that. IT as a platform, how do we share globally our findings? From a communication standpoint, are we consistently communicating innovation at a very top level, at the ground level? So a lot of elements that are supporting innovation have to be also in the functional areas. So that took a very explicit effort. That was an effort that took about a year to get this team from here's where we are to here's how we're going to go about it moving forward. And the next slide really took it to an execution standpoint. So that framework of the arch is really a way to think about it. But each one of the stones in that arch have a meaning and a set of actions under it. Okay, and for instance, if I take one, you have on the right side W, which means Whirlpool University. So what is the role that Whirlpool University has in making this happen? So the outcome of that was, in this example, a series of online courses that would teach the people how does innovation tie with the strategy and what is the role that you have to play in it. Okay, so each one of these stones has actions and people that are responsible for driving it. You know, a keystone of that is what we call the iTurbo project. That's something that I think is key, that rallying around the groups towards a common cause really takes a number of projects that you can point to, see, and expose. And that's something that really helps with the embedment of this. Some of the initiatives on this arch are ongoing, have to happen all the time. Some others were projects, so they started, they got embedded, like, okay, metrics, how do we want to go about our metrics moving forward? We created the adjustments, we implemented them, and then we just, on an ongoing basis, track them, but the change was basically a project. And just getting close to closing, that PMO really transformed into an operating council. That's one of the biggest learnings that I have, and that the group had, that it's not enough to put a PMO and then leave it to the regions or the businesses to execute. Having an operating council that oversees this on an ongoing basis is what makes it happen. And you see there what each one of these groups and who are the accountable people to, for instance, define the portfolio. And the portfolio has to be a combination of big I's and small I's, a combination of things that are in the core, beyond, and extended core, so on and so forth. And that group is the one overseeing that portfolio and allocating resources to it. And you can read through the slide and always go back to it as you're going to have it, but gives you an idea of the types of things that these groups are taking. But this council meets on an ongoing basis, looks at all of these elements, and makes decisions on how do we make adjustments moving forward. So just to close, going back to the Sea of White, you know, making innovation an explicit effort can really change the way your company is seen internally and externally. I think innovation brings excitement. People always like to be engaged in innovation, and just by the pictures, I think you can relate to that, because the picture that you see on the right side is the one that Whirlpool lives today, in that we want to continue to keep in front of our customers and create that great engagement and passion for our business and our customers. And what matters for our shareholders is that innovation drives value. So if you look at the trend that the Sea of White had, was really an average price ticket down. So we were bringing more technology at lower prices. When you drive value to the consumer is willing to pay for it and is happy with it, creates loyalty, and ultimately reflects in how the business performs. And if you tie this to the innovation definition that I shared with you, it's very important. It's why we're in business. We are in business to solve consumer problems, but also to drive shareholder value, and that's something that is reflected in the way innovation works. So just to close, and then I'll turn it back to you, Luis. Some lessons that we learned in this journey. Innovation should always be overseen. While it can be embedded and the principles can be the way the organization behaves, it requires some entity that is looking at it and always keeping the pulse in how we're performing against what our aspirations are. I think innovation has to become a key business process and a key core capability. What I mean by that is, we don't do innovation once a year and then come back next year and see what happens. When our CEO reviews the operating results, he's also looking at the innovation pipeline. It's something that we look at on a monthly basis. We're tracking, we're measuring. Everyone knows how we're performing against our goals, and just becomes part of our business. Innovation has to be managed as a cadence of projects, of innovations, and not just single projects. And I think that's something very important, because innovation is a journey, and we know that our best innovation is always going to be the next one. It's not the one we have in the marketplace today. And there's no single answer. I think what I shared with you today is what has worked for Whirlpool, what I think can work for some companies, but there are other approaches. I think a lot has to do with the strategy of the organization and what works for everyone. But I hope that some of the things that I shared with you today are relevant for some of you, and that you can take them and apply them in your business. So with that, Luis, I'll turn it back to you and see if there are any questions from you.
Good. Yeah, there's some great questions. Let's go ahead, and I do want to make sure we hit these questions right away. We can't do all of them, but let's try to do some, because they're extremely good. Hang on a second. First one. How and are you using crowdsourcing to actually come up with the ideas, sources, and contributions? What's the role of crowdsourcing or reaching out beyond small teams?
Our point of view on that, Luis, is that open innovation is a set of principles and tools in the innovation process. When all of this trend of open innovation started, and we read the books from Christensen and others, we needed to have a mindset change of innovation. Not only comes from us, but comes from others. But if you think in a step back, that is just a principle within your process. So what we've done is that we've incorporated open innovation, a set of principles and tools. And one of the tools that we have to drive innovation along the process is crowdsourcing. We found that that's mainly helpful in the latter part of our innovation process, when we think about what we call opportunity development. Once we found where do we want to play, if you will, we have some concrete opportunities and ideas of what we want to do, solving them with crowdsourcing can be very powerful. It's also a great way to gain insights, even though that's not the primary purpose of crowdsourcing. But we found that just given the large communities that are out there by many companies, it's another way to gain deeper insight that might be a little taking you away from what you know. But in our approach, we've partnered with some of the crowdsourcing vendors out there, and we really leverage that to accelerate our opportunity development, so we can get things quicker to market. So it can be either on refining the concepts or actually finding the technology that can help us deliver against the promise that we want to deliver.
Thank you, Moises. There are a variety of questions that I will mention that we're not going to be able to answer completely today. but we have them all, and we'll send you personal notes. We'll make sure you get notes. I think covering one more helps, maybe in a 1-minute answer. I think the entire issue of industrial designers, are they part of the PMO, and to what extent, I think an associated question, Moises, was how is innovation different from design? Maybe just touch on those two, and then for the rest of you, we'll be sending you quick notes here to try to help you get some more information. If you wrap up with that, Moises, I'll cover my remaining slides, and we'll end right on time.
Sounds great. You know, that's a very good question. I think design plays a very important role in innovation at different stages. In the discovery phase, for us, it's extremely important to have designers in our teams every time, because they bring a very different perspective. They're able to visualize things. In fact, I mean, they're a great complement to the teams. I think the role of design moving forward, it's also very important as you develop your ideas, and how do you communicate those to the customer. But one thing that I found extremely helpful in design thinking is just the notion of getting to understand the customer, what customers do, and what customers think, and not only what they say. So the notion of focus groups, I don't think is as powerful in the innovation space. And designers bring a great value when you are in the experimentation phase. Really prototyping, iterating, and looking at things in different ways is another way to bring great value. Just answering the other part of your question to wrap up, design is definitely part of our PMO. Our VP of design is part of the council. And as we think of how do we adjust our processes, how do we make it visible to our stakeholders, so on and so forth, they are a critical voice in this PMO and how things are executed.
Fantastic. Fantastic, Moises. Well, just to head toward closing here in the remaining 7 or 8 minutes, just sharing with you a few items, and there were questions around metrics and the measurement of metrics. We do find that sustaining what you saw is almost a 10-plus year journey at Whirlpool. It takes a strong business case that's reviewed frequently, and a business case has many aspects to it that must be measured. I'm not going to repeat all 8 that you see here, but we find that a PMO, especially in a complex, siloed, dispersed organization, is crucial to making sure you align with the business mission, and that there are results across a consistent time frame, not just at the beginning or not episodically. I think the predictability and the likelihood of executing on budgets, milestones, and even more importantly, satisfaction ratings from your end customers, your stakeholders, is increased quite a bit. So at the end of the day, it comes down to, is this program, innovation program, achieving the financial outcomes that are going to sustain it, lead to reinvestment, if not larger investment. We think many of these business case elements are positively affected by a PMO. Of course, one thing I'll share with you is some of the measurement areas, and I'm going to skip through these pretty quickly, some of you know them, some of you don't, require a system or a platform or a way to capture and measure and display the information that's going to keep you on track, focus on the right activities, invest, disinvest, you name it. And in particular, our results engine does just that. To the extent you'd like to learn more, please reach out to us. We'd like to share that with you. What a results engine does is essentially it's a configurable management platform for overseeing a portfolio of innovation initiatives. It's one of our newest product capabilities at Imaginatik. It's highly visual because as innovators and creative people, we want to see the completion of projects, not just read about it. We want to see it. We want to understand segmentation of projects, what's being sponsored, and their value. Do note down at the bottom level that using a variety of algorithms and your own data, you're able to constantly monitor valuation by source of sponsorship, but also by type of project, et cetera, et cetera. Capability to, at a single glance, see all projects, their status, what stage they're at, and obviously with our configurable results engine, you're able to define your stage gates and milestones in a way that harmonizes with your strategy, your way of working. And lastly, to see some pretty fabulous process-based representations of how the organization is doing across a broad portfolio. Again, most of the time these are Excel-based, could be product lifecycle management, but Excel-based, manual, and or even more rudimentary, sometimes SharePoint-based lists, sometimes even blogs and wikis that are being used. I think as you see the power of a results engine available to you today, you have resources available to do this kind of work on an enterprise PMO basis quite affordably that were not available before. So what are some key trends as I wrap up here? I think Moises implied, if not spoke to many of these. The organizational and communication skills, these soft skills, are incredibly important to the success of any enterprise innovation program. Likewise, anytime you layer on either dedicated people working in innovation or a PMO, there is an incremental cost and value certainly, but also cost that must be justified. And it must be measured, and one must have a way to constantly demonstrate the benefits, the risk reduction, the reasons why this is a better way to work. And sometimes that's obvious, and sometimes you have to make the case for it. And finally, in terms of quality, I think really measuring and understanding the nature of outputs from your innovation programs can be quite helpful, because often, even when you start these programs, it is easy to forget that where you came from was you were spending too much time on incremental and or not innovating sufficiently or consistently. Let's begin to measure, as Moises has done, the quality of these outcomes, not just the quantity of them. Sometimes it is a quality game over quantity, and must make sure that you're measuring the right elements there. How to get started? There were a number of questions asking how to achieve innovation culture in a large, diffuse organization that has silos, whether it's that organization or a smaller one. I think it starts out with the truth. And Moises alluded to it. They went through all of this at the beginning of their journey to really understand your current innovation environment, the true level of support, what progress has been made, and what obstacles have to be removed. That is crucial. The truth is hard, mostly for senior management to accept. The board may not even know it, but senior management may be fighting it because they feel they're innovative, but in fact, perhaps from dedicated resources to the nature of goals to listening to customers hasn't happened, and the truth isn't being adhered to. The right goals for the enterprise and business unit, and making sure they're cascading and unified so that it isn't a discordant or conflicting level of goals. Clearly, this is a multi-year change campaign. At least one of you wrote and said, my goodness, that curve in the innovation cycle was so flat from 1999 to 2003. Can that be true? I don't know that it's true for your organization, but in any event, it is our experience that robust compounding innovation does take well over 2, 3, 4 years, and that is a very good attitude to take. Create the correct innovation PMO for your organization. I think you've seen even through Moises' comments that this has been a adjusting, iterative process to try to get the right governance, organization, resource, and working structure at Whirlpool. So frankly, these things must be revisited every year. And then lastly, sometimes it helps to work with experts like Imaginatik or others that you currently work with. Fresh eyes, fresh perspectives, many cases and benchmarks for how to do this. I do want to note that several of you had said, how do we learn more about Results Engine? And I'll send out a little note sort of saying, please let Brian Mahoney, who is the organizer of our webinar series, know of your interest, and he will ensure that this filters into our organization, and within a day you are able to get attention and set up a presentation on Results Engine. You will see, I'm going to send it to all of you. If you don't have it, ping me. But it is Brian, B-R-Y-A-N _ Mahoney at Imaginatik.com. And lastly, I do want to thank John Wisnowski. He mentions my I wouldn't call him friend, strong acquaintance, Bob Johansson's book, Get There Early. I am looking at one on my bookshelf in front of me. He's the CEO of the Institute for the Future. Bob's book, Get There Early, is a brilliant book on how to achieve radical change with some different methods of scenario building and collecting different types of data. I think that's a very good suggestion, and it's terrific stuff. With that having been said, we want to thank you for your attendance. We'd like to end early on these, or right on time. We look forward to interacting with you and helping you on your innovation journey using an enterprise PMO or other useful strategies and techniques. Moises, we look forward to working with you again.
Thanks everyone.